You already know what you saw. Everyone moved forward without you. That small moment broke something tonight. You didn't fall apart. You didn't spiral. You functioned, made it through the whole day, said the right things, kept the mask adjusted, and still arrived here, in the dark, holding a quiet weight that doesn't have a clean name. It's not sadness exactly. It's the specific ache of watching someone else live the version of your life you were supposed to be building by now. The fear underneath isn't that you're struggling. It's that this might just be who you are now. That the gap between who you are and who you thought you'd be isn't a phase. It's a permanent address. That one day you'll be someone people used to know. And what makes it harder to carry is that no one around you seems to feel it the way you do. They're busy. They're reaching things. They didn't notice what you noticed tonight, and they wouldn't understand why it mattered if you told them. Nothing is being asked of you here. No version of yourself is required. Not the one who's behind. Not the one who performs like she isn't. This space doesn't need a version of you that has it together. You are allowed to arrive exactly as unfinished as you are. Welcome to Soulnest. Let the blanket settle. Notice the cool edge of the fabric before the warmth fills in underneath it. Your shoulders have been holding something all day. Not dramatically, just quietly, the way a jaw clenches without permission. Let the pillow take that now. Somewhere, a stranger is rinsing a single mug under a yellow kitchen light, the faint sound of water against ceramic. A cabinet closed too gently to wake anyone, a shadow stretching longer than it should for this hour. The day is closing itself, without your help, without needing anything more from you. Tonight, we leave the noise behind and simply let the world exist without us. And in that leaving, something loosens. The part of you that's been bracing since morning, maybe longer, maybe so long you stopped noticing it was there. Here is what no one says out loud. Feeling left behind isn't really about the milestones you haven't reached. It's about the growing suspicion that the life you were quietly constructing in your mind, the one with the right apartment, the right people, the warmth of having figured something out, may have been assembling itself for someone else this whole time. You kept building the blueprint. You just stopped being sure you were the one who'd live in it. The room around you holds a particular kind of silence tonight. Wool thick, almost textile. The kind you could press your palm against and feel it push back. Somewhere outside, the amber residue of a street lamp falls across a parked car, and the whole world seems to have agreed, without consulting you, to be very still. The sheets carry a faint smell of something laundered days ago and left to breathe, clean in a way that asks nothing of you. You function. That's the part no one credits. You answer, you appear, you maintain the version of yourself that other people are comfortable with. But underneath that, something has been running a low subterranean count. How far? How long? How many ordinary moments passed while you were waiting to feel ready enough to start? Gentle irony, you've been waiting to feel ready at the exact moment everyone else quietly decided they weren't ready either. and just went anyway, feeling left behind. It turns out, has almost nothing to do with pace. It's a failure of the mirror. You're holding an image of yourself that was built from someone else's timeline, someone else's evidence, someone else's definition of what arriving actually looks like. And that image is heavy. You've been carrying it like it was a verdict. But here, in the liminal hour when the day no longer requires your performance, you can set that image down, not forever, not dramatically, just for tonight. Let it rest on the floor beside the bed like a coat you've been wearing indoors, still buttoned, still braced for weather that already passed. Feel the ghost heat of your phone fading on the nightstand. Notice the rhythmic thrum of the building breathing around you. Pipes, settling wood, the quiet weight of everyone else also horizontal, also uncertain, also somewhere between who they were and who they're still becoming. You are not behind. You are mid-sentence. And mid-sentence is exactly where meaning gets made. And mid-sentence is exactly where night finds you. That particular suspension between the day that's closing and the version of yourself you haven't written yet. Lying still while your mind refuses the same courtesy. Here is what loneliness at night actually is. It isn't the absence of people. You know people. You have a phone full of evidence that you exist in someone's life. What night does is remove the noise that was keeping that deeper ache at a manageable distance. During the day, you are occupied. You are needed in small, practical ways. Someone wants a reply, a decision, a version of you that functions. But now the tasks are gone, the screen is dark, and what's left is the crystalline silence that doesn't lie, the specific quality of being alone with the truest version of what you feel, with no performance left to run. The ceiling above you holds a thin line of light from somewhere outside, a hallway, a street lamp, the amber glow of a city that doesn't know you're awake. The air in the room has cooled to something almost tactile, a temperature that presses lightly against your collarbones, the back of your wrists, somewhere below or above. A pipe ticks once and goes quiet, like punctuation in a language no one is translating. What the night amplifies isn't the loneliness itself. It's the unanswered question beneath it. Does anyone hold you in their mind the way you hold them in yours? Not as a contact, not as someone to reach out to eventually, but as a presence, specific and irreplaceable, the kind that leaves an actual shape in someone else's thinking. Gentle irony. The question that wakes you at 2 a.m. is the same question philosophers spent entire careers not answering. You're in excellent company, historically speaking. The subterranean fear underneath loneliness isn't that you are unloved. It's that you might be loved generally, adequately, politely, but not known. Not held with a specific gravity that makes a person feel real to themselves through someone else's eyes. But here is the paradox. The very precision of that fear, the fact that you can feel its exact shape and weight, means you are someone capable of that quality of knowing. You hold people that way. You notice. You carry. That capacity doesn't exist in people who are hollow. Let your shoulders drop another fraction. Feel the pillow accept the full weight of your skull, that archaeological pressure releasing into softness. The night isn't asking you to resolve anything. It is simply the hour when truth gets to exist without being managed. You are known to yourself. Tonight, that is enough. And knowing yourself is, it turns out, exactly what starting over asks of you. Not confidence, not clarity, not a plan that holds, just the willingness to remain honest about where you actually are, while the ground beneath you is still finding its shape. Here is what no one tells you about starting over. It doesn't feel like beginning. It feels like subtraction. The story you'd been living, the one with its particular logic, its familiar cast, its sense of direction even when the direction was wrong, that story ends. And what replaces it isn't a new story yet. What replaces it is a room with no furniture, clean walls, the faint smell of something recently vacated, and you, standing in the middle of it, trying to remember whether emptiness is a problem to solve or a condition to survive. Outside the window, the city hums its velvet thrum, low, constant, indifferent in the way only nighttime cities can be. A traffic light changes for no one at an empty intersection, cycling through its colors as though rehearsing for a morning audience. The blanket across your chest holds a gentle weight, not heavy, just present, the specific warmth of something that has been here a while, that asked nothing of you to earn it. What makes starting over quietly devastating isn't the loss of the thing itself, the relationship, the chapter, the version of the future you'd furnished in your mind. It's the loss of the context that made you legible. You knew who you were inside that story. The role gave you edges. Without it, you're trying to locate yourself without the usual landmarks. And the subterranean fear is that maybe the landmarks were the self. That without them, there's less of you than you thought. Gentle irony. You're afraid starting over means you're less. At the exact moment, it's asking you to find out how much of you was never the story at all. The paradox of starting over is that it only feels like failure from inside the timeline you've abandoned. From outside that timeline, from the vantage of the life that's actually assembling itself beneath your awareness, it looks exactly like the moment before something real. Let the empty room be empty for now. You don't need to furnish it tonight. Feel the liminal quality of the air, the suspension of a space between one thing and another, where the light comes in at an angle that doesn't favor any particular arrangement of your life yet. The walls are clean. That's not poverty. That's the specific kind of freedom that only arrives after something honest ends. You are between, and between is not nothing. And between is where you were tonight when you picked up the phone, not looking for anything specific, just filling the suspension, just giving your hands something to do while your mind negotiated with the quiet. Here is what social media actually does. It doesn't make you feel behind because other people are succeeding. It makes you feel behind because it presents the edited highlight of someone else's life at the exact moment you are living the unedited interior of your own. You're holding your raw footage, the uncertainty, the undone things, the 11 p.m. version of yourself that hasn't showered yet and is still processing something from 3 weeks ago. And the feed is offering you everyone else's final cut, graded, scored, captioned with the kind of effortless clarity that only exists in retrospect. The phone on your nightstand holds its ghost heat still, that faint warmth of a screen recently touched, the smooth glass cooling now in the dark like a stone pulled from a fire. The room is wool-thick quiet, the kind that makes your own breathing sound deliberate. Somewhere, a door in the building closes with a soft, archaeological thud, distant, muffled, belonging to someone else's night entirely. What shrinks you isn't the comparison itself. You've always known comparison was unfair. What shrinks you is the subterranean suspicion that maybe everyone else actually feels as good as they look, that the ease is real, the arrival is real, and you are the only one still carrying the weight of your own becoming as though it were a burden instead of a process. That maybe the problem isn't the timeline. Maybe the problem is you. Gentle irony. The people whose lives made you feel smallest tonight almost certainly scrolled past someone else's life feeling the exact same thing, and then posted anyway. The paradox is this: social media doesn't show you other people's lives. It shows you other people's relationship with visibility. And visibility is a performance, even when it's sincere. What you're measuring yourself against isn't a life. It's a curation, a selection, an amber glow cast carefully over the parts someone chose to illuminate. While the liminal spaces, the doubt, the 2 a.m. phone checking, the quiet falling behind, stayed dark and private, exactly as yours have. Feel the glass of the phone go cold. Let it. Feel the tactile weight of your own hand resting open now, no longer holding anything. Your palm, uncurled, is its own kind of answer. The feed is closed. The comparison ends here. What remains is just you, the room, the rhythmic thrum of a building full of people no one is photographing tonight. That's the version that's real. And real is where rest lives. And rest, you're learning, is not the same thing as sleep. You've slept. You've had the hours, logged the nights, woken to alarms with your body horizontal and your eyes closed for the full recommended duration, and still arrived at morning carrying something that 8 hours did nothing to touch. Here is what no one names correctly. There is a tiredness that lives beneath the physical. It isn't in your muscles or your eyes. It's in the part of you that has been translating yourself for other people. Managing the distance between what you actually feel and what the situation requires you to project. That translation work, the constant low-grade labor of being legible, acceptable, appropriately okay, runs on a fuel that sleep cannot replenish. You've been exhausted at a level that a mattress doesn't reach. The ceiling holds a stillness above you now. Not the crystalline silence of earlier, but something older, more archaeological, the silence of a space that has absorbed years of nights exactly like this one. The air carries a faint coolness at the edge of your jaw, where the blanket doesn't quite reach. Somewhere outside, rain that isn't quite rain, more mist than intention, settles against the glass with a sound like static being slowly turned down. You function, and functioning is its own tax. Every day you hold yourself together in public is a day you spend something that doesn't automatically refill. And the cruelest part is that from the outside, you look fine. You look like someone who is managing, and so no one thinks to ask, and you don't know how to volunteer it. And the subterranean weight just accumulates, unfiled, unwitnessed, collecting quietly in the body like sediment. Gentle irony. The better you are at appearing okay, the less permission anyone gives you to not be, including yourself. The paradox of this exhaustion is that it cannot be fixed by stopping. It can only be eased by being seen. And the first place that has to happen is here, in the liminal dark, where you stop performing okayness even to yourself. The tiredness is real. The weight is real. Naming it doesn't increase it. It begins, almost imperceptibly, to release it. Feel the specific heaviness of your legs now. Not discomfort, just presence, the tactile fact of a body that has carried you through another full day of being human in circumstances that were not always easy. That weight is evidence, not failure. The rhythmic thrum of your own breath is already slowing. Your chest rises and falls without your instruction. You don't have to fix the tiredness tonight. You only have to stop pretending it isn't there. That, quietly, is where healing begins. And healing, it turns out, doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with clarity, or momentum, or the satisfying feeling of finally being on track. It begins in small, subterranean adjustments, a loosening here, a softening there, in the quiet act of stopping a lie you'd been telling yourself so long you'd mistaken it for fact. The lie is this, that there is a timeline, that somewhere, authored by no one you can name, a schedule exists, one that specifies when you should have partnered, promoted, settled, arrived, and that your distance from it is a measurable failure. You absorbed this timeline so early, from so many directions at once, that it began to feel like gravity, neutral, objective, simply the way things fall. A thin line of amber glow crosses the far wall from somewhere you can't locate. A gap in the curtain, a light left on in a hallway, the patient residue of a city still faintly breathing. The blanket has warmed to the precise temperature of your body now, indistinguishable at the edges, as though the boundary between you and it has quietly negotiated itself into irrelevance. Somewhere, barely audible, a radiator releases a single soft tick, an old sound, almost archaeological, the voice of a building settling into the deepest part of its night. Here's what the timeline actually is: a statistical average, a mean, the midpoint of a vast range of human experiences, flattened into a single number and handed to you as a standard. By definition, half of all people fall on either side of it. The timeline was never a finish line. It was always just a description of the middle of a bell curve. You were measuring yourself against an abstraction. Gentle irony. The people you believe are on schedule are almost certainly measuring themselves against someone they believe is further ahead. An infinite regress of people feeling behind, all the way up. The paradox is that the urgency you feel about being on time is itself consuming the attention that moving requires. The clock watching is the obstacle. The very act of measuring the gap is what keeps the gap feeling permanent. Feel the weight of your body now, not as something behind, not as something that should be further along, but simply as a body in a room in the middle of a night that belongs entirely to the present moment. The present moment has no timeline in it. It never did. Only memory and anticipation carry clocks. You are exactly where you are, not late, not early, not measured against anything tonight. The amber glow holds the wall without judgment. You can let the clock go. It will still be there in the morning if you decide you want it back. And the things you want it back for, the benchmarks, the titles, the external proof that you are somewhere recognizable on the map, those too can wait until morning. Tonight, something older than your resume gets to exist. Here is what happened so gradually you didn't notice it happening. You started answering the question of who you are with what you do. Not because you're shallow, not because you were careless with yourself, but because the world made that exchange so seamless, so constantly rewarded, that it felt like self-knowledge rather than substitution. Someone asks who you are and you reach, almost involuntarily, for the title, the role, the function, the organizational chart position that at least gives you coordinates, even if the coordinates were never the territory. The room holds a deep velvet quiet now, the kind that has weight and direction, pressing gently inward from the walls. Through the window, a tree branch traces its shadow across the floor in the faint amber glow of a street lamp, still, then shifting almost imperceptibly, a slow calligraphy written in light the color of old paper. The air carries the cool mineral scent of a night that has been night for hours now, settled and certain, no longer transitioning. What no one warns you about is the specific vertigo of a title changing or disappearing or becoming something you're not sure you still want, because the title wasn't just a job. It was the answer to a question you'd been anxious about since you were old enough to understand that people needed to be able to place you. It was the thing that made introductions manageable. Without it, or in its uncertainty, you arrive at conversations and at yourself without the usual scaffolding. And the subterranean fear is that without the scaffolding, there might not be enough of a structure underneath. Gentle irony, the version of you that exists right now, unable to sleep, quietly complicated, holding more contradictions than any job title could contain. This is the most accurate version. The resume was always the simplification. The paradox is that the title felt like identity because it was legible to others and therefore, borrowedly, to you. But legibility was never intimacy. Being easily categorized was never the same as being known. Feel the tactile weight of your own hands resting on the blanket. Not a manager's hands, not an employee's, not a title's, just hands, warm, still, belonging entirely to someone whose worth was never in the function. The rhythmic thrum of your breath doesn't know what you do for a living. Your body has no job title. What remains, when the role falls quiet, is the part of you that was always real. And that part, the real part, the one no title ever fully captured, has also been quietly carrying something that job descriptions don't have a field for. The specific weight of sleeping alone when you thought by now you wouldn't be. Or the different weight of being with someone and still feeling, in certain lights, completely unwitnessed. Here is what your relationship status actually measures. Nothing about your value, nothing about your capacity for love, nothing about the quality of your interior life. What it measures is timing, circumstance, the specific intersection of your particular moment and another person's particular readiness. Variables so numerous and so beyond your control that reducing them to a verdict about your worth is not just unkind, it's logically absurd. And yet, the subterranean arithmetic runs anyway, in the dark, in the space between who you are and who you imagined you'd be standing next to by now. The sheets hold a cool smoothness against your legs, the tactile fact of a bed that is entirely yours tonight, the clean expanse of it, the slight sound of fabric shifting as you settle deeper. Through the window, the liminal blue of very late night has settled over everything, that particular shade that belongs to no hour exactly, the color of a city halfway between its last night owl and its first early riser. A single car passes somewhere below, its sound arriving and dissolving with the patience of something that was never about you. What the absence of a partner doesn't mean that you are hard to love, that something in you repels closeness, that you have somehow failed at the most basic human project. What it sometimes actually means is that you refused to settle for less than something real, and that refusal, which felt like losing, was quietly a form of self-respect so deep you didn't recognize it as such. Gentle irony. The culture that makes you feel most behind for being single is the same culture that produces approximately half of all marriages ending in the specific loneliness of being legally partnered to the wrong person. The paradox is that the longing you feel, that precise tactile ache for someone to know you completely, is not evidence of incompleteness. It is evidence of depth. Only someone with a genuine interior life hungers for genuine witness. Feel the full width of the bed as it holds you now, not as lack, but as space, archaeological space, holding the impression of who you are without negotiation, without compromise, without performing ease you don't feel. Your worth was never a relationship status. It was always the quality of attention you bring to being alive. That quality is here, right now, fully present. And presence, real presence, the kind you're capable of, is exactly what needing more time asks of you. Not speed, not acceleration, not the performance of progress for an audience that wasn't paying as close attention as you feared. Just the willingness to stay honest inside the duration of your own becoming. Here is the thing about needing more time that no one frames correctly. It gets coded as weakness, as hesitation, as the soft euphemism for someone who couldn't keep up. But what needing more time often actually is, underneath the shame of it, beneath the comparison and the apology, is thoroughness. It is the refusal of your deeper self to move on before something is genuinely understood, genuinely processed, genuinely ready to hold weight. Some people are built for speed, others are built for depth. The culture rewards the former so visibly that the latter forget their architecture was never a defect. The room has settled into its deepest quiet now, not velvet, not crystalline, but something more patient than either. A wool-thick stillness that feels almost geological, the silence of a space that has held many slow nights without judgment. A faint warmth rises from the radiator in the corner, the amber-tinged heat of something old and reliable, ticking softly through its cycles without urgency. The pillowcase holds the cool weight of your cheek, smooth, slightly resistant, a tactile anchor in the suspension of the dark. You have watched others move faster and told yourself the story that speed equals certainty, but certainty, real certainty, the kind that holds under pressure, that is almost never fast. It is accumulated. It is arrived at through the subterranean work of sitting with difficulty long enough that it yields something true. The people who seemed to leap ahead without your hesitation, many of them are circling back now, quietly, to do the work you were doing all along. Gentle irony. The time you spent being slower was, in very many cases, the time you spent being more careful with the things that actually mattered. The paradox is that needing more time is only failure when measured against a deadline that was never yours to begin with. Measured against the actual requirements of your particular life, its specific textures, its real complications, the genuine weight of what you've been carrying. The time you've taken is not excess. It is proportion. Feel your body grow heavier now, that slow, rhythmic thrum of breath deepening without effort. Your shoulders release another fraction into the mattress, not dramatically, just incrementally. The way that real things actually change. You didn't fall behind. You took the time the work required. That is not failure. That is integrity with your own pace. And integrity with your own pace means accepting tonight that the evidence of your worth is not always going to arrive on schedule. Sometimes it doesn't arrive at all, not because it isn't true, but because the people who could offer it are absorbed in their own gravity, their own silences, their own 2 a.m. negotiations with themselves. Here is what the silence actually is. It is almost never about you, and yet the mind, in the dark, in the liminal hour when the day's noise has cleared and the subterranean processing begins, takes that silence and builds a verdict from it. The unanswered message, the conversation that didn't go as deep as you needed, the friend who used to reach out and now, somehow, doesn't. The mind connects these data points with the efficiency of a prosecutor and arrives, quietly, at a case against your own significance. The nightstand holds the ghost heat of a phone face down now, its screen dark, its silence no longer active but archaeological, the fossil record of a day's worth of reaching and waiting and interpreting. Outside, the amber glow of a street lamp falls unchanged across the same patch of pavement it illuminated an hour ago, indifferent and patient, belonging to no one's story. The blanket's weight across your chest is steady, tactile, present. The rhythmic thrum of your own heartbeat just perceptible beneath it. What the silence of others most often is: distraction, overwhelm, the specific modern condition of having more connections than anyone has the bandwidth to tend. People move through their days managing a volume of relationship that no previous generation was asked to sustain, and the ones who go quiet are almost always drowning in their own interior weather, not passing judgment on yours. Gentle irony. The person whose silence is currently being interpreted as rejection is almost certainly awake somewhere, constructing their own story about someone else's silence, equally convinced it means something it doesn't. The paradox is that your significance to someone is not measured in their response frequency. Some of the people who matter most to each other go weeks without speaking. Mattering is not the same as being constantly activated. Love, real love, doesn't require continuous proof of concept. Feel the weight of the phone go fully irrelevant on the nightstand. Feel it become just an object, glass and metal, cooling, carrying no verdict. Your value was never stored in it. The silence in this room right now is not the silence of being forgotten. It is the crystalline quiet of a night that holds you without needing to announce it. You matter in ways that don't always make a sound. That has always been true. It is true right now. And what is true right now includes something you haven't tallied yet. The quiet evidence of a day that asked things of you and found you still there, still answering, even when the answering was hard. Here is what the mind does at the end of a difficult day. It audits for the grand. It scrolls back through the hours, looking for something significant enough to justify the exhaustion. A milestone reached. A problem solved with satisfying finality, a moment that would read as progress to an outside observer. And when it doesn't find those things, it files the day as empty, as lost, as further evidence of the gap. What it doesn't count, what it almost never counts, are the small acts of maintenance and decency that kept everything from unraveling. Those go unlogged, invisible, as though surviving a day with your integrity intact somehow doesn't qualify. The kitchen light you turned off before bed, you can almost feel its absence now. The darkness that replaced it, a small, deliberate act, a closing. The room around you holds the faint scent of a night that has fully arrived. That particular cool neutrality of air that has been still for hours, unhurried. Somewhere, a window settles in its frame with a sound like a single wooden note struck once and allowed to fade completely. You got up. That counted. You fed yourself, or tried to, even imperfectly. You answered something you didn't want to answer. You held yourself together in a moment that asked more than it should have. You didn't say the unkind thing you thought. You kept a small promise to yourself, or you broke one and felt bad about it, which is its own form of caring. You made it to the end of the day without becoming someone you don't recognize. Gentle irony, the achievements most worth having, showing up with decency when decency is difficult, come with no notification, no metric, no external confirmation that they happened at all. The paradox is that the days that feel the most empty are often the ones that required the most subterranean effort. The ones where simply maintaining yourself cost everything you had. A day that takes everything and leaves you still standing is not a wasted day. It is a day that tested your foundation and found it holding. Feel the specific release of a body that has been upright for hours finally allowed to be fully horizontal. The tactile surrender of your spine into the mattress, vertebra by vertebra. The rhythmic thrum of your breath beginning its long, slow deceleration. Today counted. All of it. Even the parts that don't look like anything from the outside, especially those, the invisible ones, the ones that cost you privately, are exactly what staying through hard days is made of. Not the dramatic endurance, not the triumphant persistence that makes for a good story later. The quiet, unglamorous, largely unwitnessed act of continuing when continuing was the hardest available option. Here is what no one tells you staying actually means. It isn't the absence of wanting to leave. It isn't certainty or strength in the way strength gets performed in the stories we tell about resilience. Staying through hard days is almost always accompanied by doubt, by exhaustion, by the subterranean whisper that maybe this, all of this, is simply too much for one person to carry with so little indication that it will ever become easier. Staying means doing the next thing anyway. It means getting up into a day you didn't want and moving through it with the kind of quiet courage that never gets named as courage because it doesn't look the part. Through the window, the deep blue-black of the latest hour holds the street in a kind of suspension, the amber residue of the lamp below casting its patient circle on wet pavement, the surface holding light like a dark mirror. The air in the room has the cool, clean density of deep night, slightly sharp at the edges of each breath, present in a way that feels almost tactile against the inside of your throat. The blanket has gathered warmth at the center of your chest like something tended. You stayed through a version of your life that was harder than you'd planned for. You didn't do it perfectly. No one does. And perfect endurance has never existed outside of mythology. You stayed imperfectly, sometimes resentfully, sometimes with more grace than you gave yourself credit for. You renegotiated with the difficulty on a daily basis, and you are here, which means every single one of those negotiations succeeded. Gentle irony. The people most likely to question whether they're strong enough are precisely the ones who've been quietly demonstrating extraordinary strength. Because people who aren't paying attention to the cost don't lie awake wondering if they're managing it. The paradox is that staying through hard days doesn't reveal your limits. It reveals your actual dimensions. The real size of you, which is almost always larger than the frightened estimate you made at the beginning of the difficulty. Feel the mattress holding the full weight of you now, not supporting you against something, just holding, the way the earth holds everything above it without effort or condition. The rhythmic thrum of your breath is the sound of someone who stayed. That is not a small thing. That is, quietly, everything. And everything includes this, the specific quality of being alone in a quiet room at the end of a hard day, and finding, perhaps for the first time in a while, that the solitude isn't pressing against you the way it usually does, that it has shifted, almost imperceptibly, from something you're enduring to something that is simply here, with you. neutral and unhurried. Here is what happened to solitude. Somewhere along the way, it became evidence. Every quiet evening, every unshared meal, every night without another body's warmth in the room began to feel like a confirmation of something, that you were unchosen or temporary or waiting at a station where the trains had stopped running. Solitude stopped being a condition and became a verdict. And so you stopped being able to inhabit it with any ease. Because to be comfortable alone started to feel like giving up, like accepting a consolation you weren't supposed to want. The room holds a stillness right now that is almost archaeological, layered, patient, carrying the accumulated quiet of every night this space has ever held. The faint scent of something woody and cool drifts at the edge of the air, the smell of darkness itself almost, of a room fully at rest. Against your palm, the fabric of the blanket has a slight texture, a soft, rhythmic grain that your fingers find without instruction, tracing it absently, the way the body self-soothes when the mind finally loosens its grip. What solitude actually is, underneath the story you've built around it. It is the only condition in which you can hear yourself clearly, not the performed self, not the adjusted self, not the self that's calibrating for someone else's comfort, but the subterranean self, the one that knows things before you've found words for them. Every genuinely important thing you've ever understood about your own life arrived in solitude. The noise only confirmed what the quiet had already told you. Gentle irony. You have been treating as punishment the very condition in which every poet, philosopher, and person who ever figured something true about themselves did their most important work. The paradox is that solitude feels like loneliness only when you're treating it as a waiting room. When you stop waiting, when you allow it to simply be the room you're in, it becomes something else entirely. Spacious, almost generous. Feel the liminal quality of the air around you now, the suspension of a space that belongs entirely to you, that requires nothing, that holds the amber warmth of the lamp and the cool edge of the window glass and all the textures of your own particular life without judgment. You are not waiting in this room. You are living in it. That difference is everything. And living in it, truly living in it, without the posture of waiting, is precisely the condition under which the version of you that's been growing in the dark finally has room to be recognized. Here is the particular pain of quiet growth. It doesn't feel like growth. It feels like stagnation with better vocabulary. It feels like another month passed, another season turned, and you are still here, still wrestling with the same questions, still not arrived at the version of yourself you promised you were becoming. Growth, when it's real and deep, is almost entirely invisible from the inside, because you are inside it, moving with it, unable to see the shape of what's changing, because you are the thing that's changing. A thin bar of cool light crosses the floor from the gap beneath the door. Pale, almost silver. The amber warmth of the hallway reduced to its quietest frequency by the time it reaches you. The pillow beneath your cheek holds a slight give, that particular tactile softness of something that has learned the shape of your rest over many nights. the accumulated archaeology of every time you've brought yourself here to recover. The building breathes its slow, rhythmic thrum around you. Pipes, beams, the patient settling of a structure that has held through worse nights than this. What has been growing in you while you were busy measuring what wasn't happening? A higher threshold for what you'll accept disguised as love. A sharper instinct for the difference between what you want and what you've been told to want. A growing quiet authority over your own interior life that didn't exist in the version of you from 3 years ago. You are not who you were. The evidence just doesn't live on the surface. Gentle irony, the version of you that you're impatiently waiting to become is, at this exact moment, being assembled, and the impatience is the only thing obscuring the view. The paradox of quiet growth is that it requires the very conditions you've been mistaking for failure. The slow seasons, the in-between chapters, the long stretches without dramatic confirmation that anything is happening. The tree that grows in winter does it underground, in the dark, without any of the visible signals of aliveness. And then spring arrives, and what looked like absence turns out to have been accumulation. Feel the subterranean warmth of your own body now. The slow heat generated simply by being alive, rising through the blanket without effort or intention. That warmth is not metaphor. It is evidence. Something is growing here. Something has been growing for longer than you know. You don't have to see it tonight to trust that it's real. And trusting what's real without visible proof is, it turns out, exactly what a tired nervous system cannot easily do. Because a nervous system that has been running at high alert for too long loses access to trust as a baseline. Everything starts to require evidence. Everything starts to feel like a question that needs answering before it's safe to rest. Here is what no one explains about the kind of tired you might be carrying. It isn't laziness, and it isn't weakness, and it isn't a character flaw that more discipline would correct. It is the predictable, physiological consequence of a system that has been asked to manage too much uncertainty for too long. Your nervous system was designed for acute threat, the kind that arrives, demands a response, and resolves. It was not designed for the chronic, low-grade, unresolvable ambiguity of a life in transition, a future unconfirmed, an identity mid-revision. The alarm that was meant to save you in emergencies has been running as background noise for so long that you've started to think the alarm is just what the air sounds like. The ceiling above you is perfectly still. No movement, no demand, just a flat, pale expanse holding the room's quietest darkness. Through some gap in the curtain, a single point of amber light touches the wall near the corner, small, constant, the ghost heat equivalent of illumination, warm without warmth, present without pressure. Against the backs of your hands, the blanket holds a fine, close texture, the specific tactile comfort of a weight that asks nothing and provides much. The tightness you carry in the jaw, behind the sternum, in the place just below your shoulder blades where tension pools and calcifies, that is not a personality trait. That is a nervous system that was doing its job in conditions that made its job nearly impossible. It was protecting you, imperfectly, exhaustingly, at great cost to your sense of ease, but protecting you nonetheless. Gentle irony. The system you've been frustrated with for making everything feel harder than it should be is the same system that kept you upright through everything it was responding to. The paradox is that a tired nervous system doesn't need to be fixed or overridden or managed into compliance. It needs, with extraordinary simplicity, to be shown repeatedly, gently, through accumulated evidence that the threat has passed, that this room is safe, that this moment requires nothing. Feel the subterranean shift of your body accepting the mattress fully now. The slow, archaeological release of weight that has been held against gravity all day. The rhythmic thrum of your breath is already doing the work. Slower, longer, the system learning, again, what safe feels like. You are not broken. You are a precise instrument that has been played too loud for too long. The volume is coming down now. And as the volume comes down, something else becomes audible underneath. Not noise, not urgency, but the quiet frequency of a future that is still assembling itself beyond the edge of what you can currently see or plan or control. Here is the specific grief no one names cleanly, the loneliness of a present that hasn't yet introduced you to the people who will matter most. You know, intellectually, that your life is not yet complete, that chapters are still unwritten, that significant people are still, at this exact moment, living their own separate lives somewhere in the world, unaware of your existence, moving toward you along timelines neither of you has access to. You know this, and still the present tense of their absence aches as though they were lost rather than simply not yet arrived. The room holds a soft velvet darkness now, the kind that has fully settled, no longer transitioning between states, but simply resting in its own depth. Through the window, a light in a building across the way glows amber and warm. Someone else awake, someone else's lamp illuminating a life you know nothing about. A stranger inside a story that runs parallel to yours without yet touching. The air against your face is cool and still, the faint, tactile weight of a night that has given up all pretense of urgency. What you cannot yet know, what the present tense structurally prevents you from knowing, is who is coming. The person whose specific sense of humor will make you feel, for the first time in a long time, completely understood. The friend you'll make in a room you haven't entered yet, in a conversation that begins unremarkably and becomes, without announcement, one of the most important of your life. They exist. They are real. They are tonight, somewhere, also lying in the dark, also carrying their version of this same unnamed longing. Gentle irony. The people who will one day feel like home to you are currently strangers, which means every stranger contains, at least theoretically, that possibility. The world is full of people who haven't met you yet. The paradox is that the loneliness you feel right now is not evidence that connection is unavailable to you. It is evidence that you are someone for whom connection genuinely matters. And people for whom it genuinely matters tend, eventually, to find each other because they are both looking with the same quality of attention. Feel the subterranean warmth of the bed holding you in the suspension of a night that contains more future than past. The rhythmic thrum of your breath is steady and slow. Somewhere, someone who will love you well is also breathing in the dark. The distance between you is not permanent, it is just not yet resolved. And unresolved is allowed to stay unresolved tonight, not as failure, not as postponement, but as the simple acknowledgement that some things are not problems to be solved in the dark, alone, with a mind that has already spent everything it had. Here is what happens at 2 a.m. that doesn't happen at 2 p.m. The prefrontal cortex, the part of you that maintains perspective, that understands context, that knows the difference between a genuine crisis and a tired mind amplifying a manageable difficulty, begins to step back. What remains is older, more animal, more absolute. The thoughts that arrive in this hour have the quality of verdicts because the part of you that could moderate them into questions has gone quiet. Everything feels final. Everything feels like the truth. And so you lie there conducting a trial for which you are simultaneously the defendant, the prosecutor, and the only witness in a courtroom with no windows at an hour specifically designed to produce the worst possible outcomes. The room around you is deeply, almost geologically quiet. The kind of silence that has layers, that has been accumulating since midnight, wool-thick and undemanding. A thin luminescence comes through the curtain's edge, not quite the amber of a street lamp, cooler than that. The blue silver of a night that has passed its deepest point and begun, almost imperceptibly, its slow return. Against your legs, the sheets hold the gathered warmth of hours, the tactile record of a body that has been here, still, for long enough that the bed has learned its shape. The problems you are trying to solve right now are real. The questions are genuine. The life that needs attention is actually your life, and it actually needs attention. None of that is wrong. What is wrong is the timing, the subterranean conviction that resolution is both possible and required before morning, when in fact the mind at this hour is the least equipped it will ever be to find it. Gentle irony, the answers you've been desperate for at 2 a.m. have almost never arrived at 2 a.m. They arrive in the shower, on a Tuesday, while you're doing something unremarkable and your mind has finally stopped hunting. The paradox is that releasing the problem tonight is not the same as abandoning it. The problem will be there in the morning, fully intact, and you will be better, measurably, physiologically better, at meeting it. Feel the weight of the thinking begin to soften now. The rhythmic thrum of your breath loosening the grip of each circling thought. Let them exist without your participation. The night asks only one thing, that you stop solving and start resting. The rest is tomorrow's work. And tomorrow's work is real. You're not pretending otherwise. There are things waiting, decisions unmade, conversations unfinished, the ongoing weight of a life that requires your participation. Tomorrow will ask things of you, but tomorrow has not arrived yet. And the extraordinary thing about time, the thing the anxious mind refuses to accept, is that it actually does move in sequence. Tomorrow cannot reach back and collect what it's owed before its turn. Here is the particular exhaustion of carrying tomorrow inside tonight. It means you are never fully anywhere. The present moment becomes a waiting room for a future that keeps receding, and you spend the actual texture of your life, its specific warmth, its real and available small comforts, in a kind of suspension, neither resting in now nor actually arriving at then. You are pre-living the difficulty. You are paying the cost of tomorrow before tomorrow has rendered its invoice. The window holds a darkness that has shifted slightly, not lighter, but different. The crystalline quality of the very late hours when the night has fully committed to itself, certain and still. From somewhere outside, a sound reaches you once and dissolves, a distant door, a footstep on pavement. The brief evidence of another life moving through its own timeline without urgency. The warmth at the center of the blanket has deepened. The tactile fact of a body that has been horizontal long enough to stop bracing. The sheets carrying the faint scent of something laundered and unhurried. What tomorrow actually needs from you is not vigilance tonight. What tomorrow needs is the version of you that slept, the one with access to patience, to proportion, to the quiet authority that exhaustion strips away. Every hour you spend holding tomorrow inside tonight is an hour that diminishes the very capacity tomorrow will require. You are not preparing. You are depleting. Gentle irony. The future you're trying to protect by worrying about it tonight is made materially worse by the worrying itself, which means the most responsible thing you can do for tomorrow is to fully abandon it until it arrives. The paradox is that letting tomorrow hold tomorrow is not avoidance. It is the only form of preparation that actually works at this hour. Feel the subterranean release of each thought about tomorrow as it rises, not suppressed, not argued with, just observed and allowed to pass like a car moving through a street below, its sound arriving and then receding into silence without taking anything with it. The rhythmic thrum of your breath is slower now. The amber residue of the day is fading. Tomorrow will hold itself. It always has. Tonight is asking only to be inhabited. And inhabiting it means, finally, arriving in the body, not the thinking body, not the planning body, not the body that has been held slightly above the mattress all this time by the residual tension of a mind that hadn't finished yet. The actual body, this one, the one that has been waiting with extraordinary patience for you to come home to it. Here is what no one tells you about physical rest. It cannot be willed. You cannot instruct the body to be heavy the way you instruct yourself to complete a task. And the trying, the effortful pursuit of surrender is precisely what keeps surrender at a distance. What the body needs is not your direction. It needs your absence, in the most specific sense, the withdrawal of the mental grip that has been holding it slightly braced, slightly prepared, slightly ready for something that is not coming tonight. The room has reached its fullest quiet now. Not silence exactly, but the wool-thick stillness of a space where even the air has stopped pretending to move. The lamp somewhere beyond the curtain has dimmed to its most amber. That ancient artifact glow of a light source that has burned through the whole night without acknowledgement. Against the backs of your knees, the sheets hold a deep, accumulated warmth, the tactile record of hours of rest, soft and dense, the temperature of something that has been tended without effort, the weight you've been holding in your shoulders, the subterranean brace that installed itself so gradually you stopped knowing it was a choice, is allowed now to simply fall, not released dramatically, just no longer maintained. The difference between holding and not holding is smaller than you think, and the body finds it almost immediately when the mind finally stops insisting on readiness. Gentle irony. The heaviness you've been resisting all night, the slow, thickening pull toward sleep, was never the enemy. It was the destination, patiently waiting at the end of every thought you sent ahead of it. The paradox is that the body already knows how to do this. It has been sleeping since before you had language, before you had problems, before you had a single thing to figure out. The knowledge is older than everything you've learned since. You don't need to find it. You only need to stop interrupting it. Feel the weight of your legs now, the specific, tactile heaviness of limbs that have carried you through an entire day and are ready, with a completeness that requires no decision, to be still. Feel the warmth spreading upward from the center of the blanket. The rhythmic thrum of your breath is slow and deep and entirely automatic. Your body knows the way. You have always known the way. Let it go now. And letting go is not a decision so much as a gradual discovery. The finding that the grip has already loosened, that the vigilance has already begun its slow recession, that the part of you still trying to remain present is working harder and harder against a tide that has, without announcement, turned in the direction of rest. Here is what makes drifting difficult for someone like you. You have learned, through long and specific experience, that staying alert is a form of safety, that awareness is protection, that the moment you stop monitoring the situation, the future, the version of yourself you're supposed to be building, something will slip, something will be missed, something will cost you. And so the very threshold of sleep becomes a place of subterranean resistance. Because sleep asks for the one thing vigilance cannot provide: complete surrender of the watch. The room exists around you now as pure sensation rather than space. The archaeological warmth of sheets that have held you for hours, the cool stillness of air against the small exposed curve of your shoulder, a darkness so complete it has its own texture, velvet and total, pressing gently at the edges of your awareness like something patient that has been waiting for permission to arrive, somewhere infinitely far away. The amber residue of a street lamp continues its indifferent vigil over an empty street that requires nothing from anyone tonight. What you are guarding against at the edge of sleep is already handled. Not solved. You know it isn't solved. But held. The night is holding it. The morning will hold it. The part of you that needs to carry it has already done its shift, and the shift is over, and there is another version of you, rested, more capable, returned to proportion, who will pick it up again and carry it better for having been put down. Gentle irony. The self you are protecting by staying alert is the very self that is most damaged by remaining so. The tiredness compounds with every minute of resistance, and the thing you were guarding gets harder to carry. The paradox of drifting is that it cannot be aimed at. The moment you try to reach sleep, sleep withdraws. What you can do, the only available motion, is to stop reaching entirely, to let the thoughts arise and pass without boarding them, to let the body's rhythmic thrum become the only sound that matters. Feel the edges of yourself becoming less defined now, the boundary between your body and the warmth around it softening. That liminal dissolve where you end and rest begins growing harder to locate. You are already most of the way there. The rest is not a destination. It is simply what remains when you finally stop leaving. And what remains, once the leaving stops, is simply this: the room, the warmth, the dark that has been here the whole time, unhurried, asking nothing, holding everything you brought to it tonight without complaint and without condition. You are not behind. You never were. You were always only here, in the particular life that belongs to you, moving at the speed that the weight of it required. The air at the tip of your nose is cooler than the rest of you, just slightly. The blanket is warm from your own heat. The two exist at the same time, without contradiction. The room has gone quiet in layers. The thoughts are further apart now, the spaces between them longer. Somewhere outside, a streetlight flickers once, barely, just a brief dimming, a catch in its long exhale, and then holds steady over an empty pavement that no one is crossing. A moth, if there is one, orbits it in silence. The light doesn't notice. The dark around it doesn't either. The ceiling above you is still. The blanket is still. Your hands are.